All right, welcome to the Name Tags Chat podcast. Today, we are with Mike Shultz. We're actually here on Veterans Day. Mike is a snowboarder, amputee, above the knee amputee snowboarder, won gold and silver in PeongChang. He's not just a snowboarder, though. He has won 10 X Games medals in a variety of sports. Actually lost his leg in a snowmobile cross, a SnoCross. Is that what they call it, Mike?
Yeah,
SnoCross. Has won an ESPY, was a flag bearer in 2018, voted 10 Outstanding Americans in 2014, Popular Science back in 2013, because we're going to talk about this. He created a company called BioDapt, which creates the prosthetic that he uses to allow him to do what he wants to do on the hill, on the motorcycle, on the snowmobile, but he also outfits a lot of his competitors, which sounds like a bit of a sketchy way to go, but he outfits a bunch of his competitors as well. I don't know if he gives them all the good stuff. We'll hear about that. But the other one that I thought was so great was Popular Science back in 2013 had him as had his invention of his leg. I assume it was your leg. It was your leg, your knee, your foot. We'll find out what it was one of the top 10 inventions of 2013. So Mike, you're known to me as a snowboarder, but snowboarding in a lot of ways was almost the test thing that you did, isn't it? Didn't you just go out and start testing your legs so that you could do something else and it became a sport? How did that happen?
Yeah, honestly, well, hey, first off, thanks a lot, Chris, for having me part of the show. Looking forward to this chat. Lots of stuff to go over. Yeah, snowboarding is the newest sport in my repertoire. I come from a motorsports background with motocross and snowmobile racing. And snowboarding actually came about after I became an amputee in 2008. And it was purely to test the new prosthetic devices that I was creating with my new company, BioDapt. I was injured in 2008. I didn't want to slow down, so I hit the drawing board, developed the equipment to get myself back into action, and then realized that a lot of others could benefit from it. So I wanted versatility with the equipment I was building, so I learned how to do a bunch of other sports as an amputee, and snowboarding was one of them. And then turns out is a heck of a lot of fun, and got talked into competing. And here we are, a bunch of years later, as part of the Team USA snowboard team and outfitting a whole lot of other athletes with the equipment I developed in our BioDapt shop.
How did you make the step to start creating your legs? Because it sounds like, for the layperson, creating a prosthetic sounds like something that is super, super specific. And I read that you said that you had been tuning your suspension. And what was the step that went from tuning your suspension to creating a leg? Because that seems like a big step to me.
I've since the beginning, as far back as I can remember, I've had two passions in my life. One is being the competitor, and the other is I absolutely love designing and fabricating things in my shop. And I think real mechanically. So, honestly, I was kind of the perfect guy for this problem to solve. Because your legs are like suspension components to absorb impacts while you're doing all these crazy jumps and bumps and everything on the dirt bike and snowmobile. And so, I looked at it like that, and, I knew suspension components. I knew how to build stuff in the shop. So, I had three different things I was looking at. I had, the space available between my knee or my lower lip or the end of my limb and where my foot is. I had 12 inches to work with. I needed my knee to flex 130 degrees range of motion, which is what our normal knees do. And then I knew I wanted to use this small, compact Fox mountain bike shock to absorb those impacts, and it uses air spring as like your quadricep muscles. So I took all those pieces of information and figured out how to make it all work geometrically with different pivot points and space available and angular motion and all that jibber jabber stuff.
Are you doing the socket as well? So fitting on the stump?
No, I do everything below that. So the
Okay.
top of my knee or the top of the foot uses common adapters to connect. And yeah, our equipment can be used both for above knee amputees and below knee amputees.
Wow. Okay. And so it sounds like the suspension is the biggest part, the most important part of what you're doing. Is that right? To the suspension, and can you talk us through what the suspension means, what it does? Because you have both a knee and an ankle joint, right?
Yeah, so like the fundamental difference between my everyday walking leg and my high activity sport leg is, so when I'm walking with my everyday system, the knee has to swing back and forth when I'm moving. There's no spring tension that will extend it or try and extend it like your quadriceps do. So it's all about timing when you're walking. And for sport, you need those quadricep muscles engaged to hold your leg up, or so it doesn't flex, so it resists to flexing. And so that's where this mountain bike shock comes into play. So it's sitting right in there, and so as the socket attaches up here, and this is the axis point, so this is where it flexes, and as that rotates, it compresses the shock down this track roller. And so that's really tunable with air pressure and hydraulic dampening. So depending on the sport, we can fine tune it to be stiffer or softer, to move quicker or slower. And then the foot has another smaller version of those shocks in there. Basically, it controls the ankle as you put weight into it.
So how do you balance this? Are you taking your shock? Because the idea of being an athlete is that you want to be as symmetrical as possible, right?
Yeah,
So you're
absolutely.
missing one leg. And then does that mean that in the leg, in the prosthetic leg, that you're trying to match in some ways like the strength of your quadriceps, so that you're getting the same kind of push from that leg that you are from your regular leg? Or how does that work?
Well, it ends up being about 40% less,
Okay.
because you always want to lead your movements with your good side, because that's how you decide if you want to be stiff-legged or if you want to absorb something. Like in border cross, like a big part of trying to go fast is absorbing the rollers with your legs. So your body moves straight, but your legs are just, kind of absorbing as you go down the course, and you keep your forward momentum. So that's kind of tricky because I don't yet have electronics into this system to help it decide how quickly to move. So I have to have it stiff enough to help carry my weight and absorb those impacts, but soft enough so I can still flex it when I shift weight into it, when I have a big roller coming up or the face of a jump or landing. So it's definitely, it takes a while to get used to, but yeah, I mean, people can adapt pretty quick when they really want to and they're motivated to.
So you kind of create that happy medium, and then through your training, you know how your equipment is going to respond. And as a result of knowing how your equipment is going to respond, you can anticipate and adapt to the equipment. Is that basically how, am I understanding it correctly? I guess
Oh,
is what I'm saying.
absolutely. Yep, absolutely. There's no fine print that says exactly how you're supposed to do it. It's you bolt it on and you go out for a ride and you kind of figure it out. So we as a company, we have these baseline settings, for different activities. For example, like for a 180-pound person, for snowboarding, we want to run like 165 PSI in the knee shock. We want to run 160 PSI in the ankle shock. And, that'll fluctuate depending on people's skill level and how aggressive they want to ride and that kind of thing.
How are you compiling your data? So is there a computer? Is there some sort of a sensor? Are you doing it through trial and error? How does that data work that then you say, okay, for a 180-pound guy, we want 160 PSI?
That it's, we keep data a couple different ways. We have done some really high-tech testing with sensors, potentiometers, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's really high tech. There's lots of graphs and it's a lot of jargon that I don't understand, but basically it translates into shaft speed and that kind of thing. And depending on the tuning that we do, it affects how quick it moves under certain loads. But, you know, that's really complicated. So basically it all comes down to, you know, just in-person trials.
What it feels like.
When we began, you know, it was just me putting it on, doing all these different activities. That's where the snowboarding came in, you know, so I could have that baseline setting. And so I've got files after files of data that we've accrued over the years with different athletes. And, you know, the thing is with snowboarding is there's so many variables. Like it's the terrain you're riding. It's the, how aggressive you want to ride. It's what stance you are. You have your prosthetic in the front or in the back, which are very, very different baseline settings, depending on if you have your prosthesis in the front or back, because you got to match the slope of the mountain. And so for example, the prosthesis, when it's in the front, you want it more extended. And if it's in the back, you want it more flexed to match the slope of the terrain.
Which goes back and forth too, right? As a snowboarder, it depends on whether you're riding standard or goofy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Once you got that all figured out, then you're like, oh, well, are you goofy or regular? Oh, well, then you're the other way. So yeah, lots of variables.
Does this all translate back to what you're doing in motocross and what you were doing riding snowmobiles?
Yeah, it's like a lot of the knowledge with tuning equipment and suspension components all started from motorsports, which is translating into how I understand different movements needed in order to ride my snowboard. And bottom line is, like, the more time that you spend trying to figure out how your legs are going to work in different activities, it's all going to cross over and help each other out. And, you know, ultimately make you more prepared to react to a certain physical situation.
Now, so you ended up here as a result of a snowmobile accident, right? You went over and got your left leg caught underneath the snowmobile and lost your leg. What did you come back to? What was the first sport that you came back to, or what did you think at that point? Did you think you were going to get back into sports, or how did that work?
It was honestly, it was really nuts. So what happened, what caused me to become an amputee was I didn't get tangled up with my sled at all. I was going down this rough downhill section. My sled started swapping side to side. I got pitched off to the left side and landed feet first. And I hyperextended my left knee joint to the point to where it just crumbled apart, caused a compound fracture, severed the popliteal artery, and very, very complicated situation with you know, loss of blood and tissue dying and all that. And yeah, I almost didn't make it through it over the following couple of days. But you know, honestly, what kept me driving forward was, I guess, first is, you know, obviously I'm in motocross and snowmobile racing. I've had a handful of injuries, so I was kind of prepared mentally how to recover from an injury. And, you know, it's a step-by-step process. And, you know, first is to physically recover from your injuries. And then the next point is to do all your physical therapy. And, you know, that can be kind of hard if you don't have the right motivation for it. And for me, the motivation was to get back on my dirt bike the following spring, or back on my snowmobile and then on my dirt bike. And so I use that as the motivation to keep driving me forward, to, you know, ultimately develop the tools to get me back on track. And the biggest motivator for me was so my injury was in December 2008. And then in March 2009, you know, just a few months later, I found out about the Summer X Games Adaptive Supercross. And, like, are you kidding me? A motocross race at the Summer X Games for amputees and paraplegics. Like, the timing was unbelievable. That was the second year that they had that part of their program. I had been an X Games athlete for a handful of years on the snowmobile side, on the professional side. And so, I mean, the timing was just perfect. And that was my motivation to create the tools to get me back into the, the highest performance level I could. And yeah, so I hit the drawing board and started developing my knee. It took about 6-7 weeks from the time I made the decision to create it to the time I had my first prototype.
And were you able to sort of leap over the mental, emotional part of it that, yeah, you had a lot of injuries before, but when you had injuries before, it was, you could heal and you could come back and you'd be effectively the same as you were before. This was one that you were going to be different than you'd been before. It was uncharted waters. Was the emotional part difficult for you?
Absolutely. Like, honestly, for the several weeks following the amputation, like, I wanted nothing to do with competition anymore. I knew I would probably continue riding my snowmobile or ATV recreationally, just trail riding. Obviously, I knew I could figure that out, but the competition side, I had my mind made that I knew I wasn't going to be nearly as fast as I ever was. So what's the point? And so I fought with that for a while, honestly. But, once I started getting better, I learned how to walk on my first prosthesis, got on my snowmobile a little bit, and I had that feeling of challenge in front of me. And I'm like, well, shit, I'm not near as fast as I used to be, but this is still a challenge. And that's really what it's all about, is like, an athlete thrives on the challenge ahead of them. And, it doesn't matter if you're going 100 miles an hour, if you're going 5 miles an hour, if you're working your tail off to try and get there, well, that's pretty satisfying.
Did it feel like you were starting over? Did it feel like you were starting over in some ways with a bit of an advantage? Like you knew all this stuff before and then you're starting over?
Yeah, it was starting from probably square 5 out of 100. I wasn't totally at the bottom. No, I was probably like 25 out of 100, because I knew how to look at a challenge in front of me and try to put the pieces together to achieve that goal. But yeah, there was so many times over the first year and a half of learning how to ride a motocross bike. Initially I thought I'd have to get rid of it completely. I was like, I only got one leg. I'm not going to be able to balance on 2 wheels. Well, I figured that out pretty quick. Yeah, I can figure it out.
What happened that first Supercross? So you got going with the idea that you were going to do this summer Supercross, and you'd not competed in the summer X Games, right? Prior to this,
no, never.
Winter. And yeah, what was this like? What was it showing up, and what was the competition like? What was it like getting to the starting line? How did this all work?
Oh man, so it was that summer was incredible. So we had a qualifying race at Extremity Games, which was an amazing adaptive sports program, and they had multiple sports. Motocross was one of them, and that was a qualifier to get into the adaptive Supercross at X Games. And so the qualifier was 5 months after my injury happened, and I didn't know what. I had no idea what to expect. And so I went there 5 months after my injury happened on the leg that I built in the garage. It was the very first prototype. It was pretty rough looking, and I was able to get around the track pretty good. I qualified, I earned a spot to X Games, which was 7 months after my injury. And it was a fast track learning curve. Let me tell you, like, I put myself in situations that I was like, am I really doing this? My wife, Sarah, and I, we constantly went back and forth. Like, you almost died a few months ago from an injury. Like, and we're seriously jumping back into this right away. So we definitely fought with that a little bit, but man, it was so exciting to be part of that. And I was so nervous riding the course at X Games. I mean, it's not just a standard Supercross course that you see all the pros ripping around on. It's X Games. They always do it like 20% bigger and better and gnarlier than regular Supercross racing. And so, like, I went in there, I wanted to conquer the race course. I wanted to be able to do these big jumps and, conquer the course, and wherever I landed, within the finishes, I was going to be happy about it. So yeah, I ended up silver. I took a silver medal. It was pretty incredible.
So was it the fear that made you, that was the fear, right? The fear that I'm going to get hurt again, that I could be, that I could actually die this time. Is that what the worry, what the nervousness was all about? Or what was or was it just that it was such a new world? Is it going to work? Am I going to embarrass myself? Why the nervous?
Yeah, well, so Chris, I'm sure you got nervous on the start line. You did. Did you do downhill when you were raised? No.
I did. And downhill scared me to death.
I know, you know exactly what it's feeling like. And, here I am at X Games. During practice, you're looking at these big features. Like, for example, the finish line jump was 80 foot long. It had a 12-foot tall face on it. So you're just coming out of this right-hand corner and it's a wall of dirt, and it's 80 feet to the landing. And so that's why I was scared out of my mind. You come up short, it's going to hurt like hell. It's not going to feel good. So I ended up, so there was 2 features that really scared me. It was a finish line 80 footer. And then there was a triple jump on the, halfway through the course, which was 90 foot. And in the last practice session, I went for it finally. And I came up about 6 feet short, and I cased it, and I slammed my head off the handlebars, and I got a black eye, but I did it. I did it. And so I was ready for the race, sort of.
For the race. And did you do it in the race? Did you go for the triple in the race?
I did. Yeah, I did. It was not every lap, but most of the race I was doing it. And, to me, that's what I was out there to try and accomplish. I wanted to be that one-legged guy that was going to go hit all these big features.
What were the crowds like?
The first year, so we didn't have a huge crowd the first year. At X Games, X Games was the best year for Summer X was in 2013. And it was at the Staples Center, right downtown LA. And we were lined up right ahead of the pro race. And so the stands were packed, and that crowd there was just, man, there was so much energy in there. It was unbelievable.
Wow. Now, so that was your start. That was your start in X Games. So you're in the X Games, you did the motocross. So where did it go from there? Did it go back to snowmobiles?
Yeah, I went right from the dirt bikes into snowmobiles. And, about that time, going into 2010, I realized that, I want to create a business around this equipment that I'm developing. I went to the SnoCross, Winter X SnoCross, and got a gold there, which, with my background in professional snowcross, I kind of had a head start on everybody. But that was like the comeback. That was, I looked there. I was with all my old teammates and my old competitors, and being able to be there racing, the season after I almost, didn't make it through a knee injury, to be there on track with the rest of them. That was a really special moment.
When did you think that the company was going to be, that this is what you wanted to do, that you wanted to develop? Because it's happening parallel, right? You have what you're doing as a competitor and what you're creating as a leg, and it's happening in parallel. When did you decide that the company was going to be a viable thing, that you went from the prototype to hey, I'm going to start producing this, I'm going to start selling it to other people?
That would have been spring 2011, when I met up with a adaptive snowboarder, Keith Deutsch. And he was like the second person who bought a moto knee from me eventually. But he reached out to me. He's a veteran. And so he had been snowboarding for a few years on other equipment, and he was looking for something better. So he got in touch with me at X Games in 2010, I think it was. And he's like, will this work for snowboarding? And I'm like, I don't know. I should try that out. So that's what got me to try snowboarding, was basically to test it for Keith. I learned how to snowboard just good enough to understand if it was going to work or not. I was freaking falling on my face and on my ass the whole way down the mountain. But I'm like, okay, a guy with skills can, he'd be able to figure this out. So he I ended up meeting up with him in the spring of 2011, I believe it was. And he knew he wanted it. So he talked to his guys back at Walter Reed, and that opened the door. So Walter Reed ended up purchasing like the second moto knee that I produced. And that just opened the door for a lot of other veterans. And, you know, that getting the feedback from Keith and then another, you know, the guy who bought the first moto knee, getting the feedback from them was like, dang, this feels pretty good, being able to create something in my shop and eventually help somebody else achieve their goals. And, you know, I obviously knew it was going to help me go after mine, but to help somebody else do that, that was pretty powerful and motivating. So I'm like, yeah, I want to see how far I can take this. And yeah, that was, the company started officially in 2010, the summer of 2010. And now we're going into our, you know, 10th year, and we've had the moto knee, the VersaFoot, and now we're on our second generation VersaFoot. And this year, over the next month or two, we're going to be launching 3 new products. So it's pretty cool. And you know, being it's Veterans Day today, you know, I gotta say that's been one of the biggest pleasures or rewards of what I'm doing with my prosthetic business, is being able to help our veterans get back into action and doing, you know, the fun things in life. And so, yeah, my hat's off to all of our vets around the world.
It's got to be great to see that, to be able to do that, right? Because the veterans are out there fighting for our freedom, but then also as a Paralympic athlete, the veterans were really responsible for so much of what came first, right? Even going back to Stoke Mandeville, when the veterans were the first people to get into what became the Paralympics. But then also so much of the other equipment, like the mono ski that I skied in, was developed by a veteran. Our ski team, when I first started, was a lot of Vietnam vets who created the programs that then allowed us to not miss a year or not miss any time. Obviously, the X Games is a little bit different. I don't know that is directly related. Had you snowboarded before at all, like before your accident, or did you pick it up after you'd lost your leg as a crash test dummy?
I think I snowboarded like 3 times.
Okay.
In my entire, you know, previous 27 years of life. My board sport experience was wakeboarding a few summers, like, you know, just hanging out with some friends, just wakeboarding, you know, not good by any means. So yeah, the snowboarding was picked up purely to test my moto knee and VersaFoot for other people to try and use it. And as that evolved, as Walter Reed started purchasing more equipment from us, they've got a lot of really great programs where they bring vets out, recreational, like the Breckenridge Ski Spec, and then also there's a Vail Veterans program. And I was able to go out and help a handful of these vets learn how to use the equipment they just purchased. And you know, that's what really got me into learning how to snowboard on big mountains. So I'm from central Minnesota. I've got this little molehill out 10 minutes from me, which is awesome, you know, for central Minnesota, but I've got, you know, 300 and some vertical feet to work with. And when I was able to go out to, you know, Breckenridge or Vail, like that's a whole new world. And I tell you what, you can learn how to snowboard a lot faster when you've got a couple thousand feet to work with.
When you're not constantly riding the lift, right? You're back and forth, you're 300 feet back up to the top. So when did you decide? So you were starting to learn how to snowboard concurrently, like helping these guys to learn how to snowboard and doing it yourself. When did it become a sport for you? And how did it become a sport?
Well, my first big dive into it was in 2012. So at that point, I had been snowboarding for a couple seasons. And I got in touch with Adaptive Action Sports out of Copper Mountain. And, you know, they were a big part of the Adaptive Supercross. So Dan Gale and Amy Purdy, they ran the program for the Supercross side. And so that opened the door for me to go snowboarding with them at Copper Mountain and a bunch of other adaptive riders. And they eventually talked me into competing, going down a course for the first time, which, yeah, that was scary. That was in 2011, I think. It would have been the spring 2011. And I'm like, oh man,
Hold on. So you're saying going down a course. What was this course? Was this a Border X course or a Border Cross course?
Yeah, it was a Border Cross course for the, let's see, I think it was the Nationals for the adaptive side of things. And I made it down, I think. It was not fast. But the crazy thing was, so the following year, X Games announced that they weren't going to have any adaptive snowcross that year. And I had been part of the Winter X Games every year but one when I got injured. But they just happened to have adaptive border cross in 2012. I'm like, okay, well, the adaptive action sports guys reached out to me. They're like, would you have any interest in this at all? And I'm like, I don't know. It's a chance for me to continue with my X Games season. But so that was, yep. I said, okay, let's do it. So I fast tracked my snowboard learning curve. 17 days on snow leading into that season, and I went down Winter X Games border cross course in 2012. That was pretty intense.
With your Supercross, that the X Games goes another 20% more than everybody else. Can you describe what border cross is?
Well, in short, it's motocross stretched out down a mountain on a snowboard. You've got no handlebars, you've got no brakes. Well, I mean, you kind of do when you slide sideways, but you got nothing to hang on to with your hands. And like, for me, that's the biggest challenge. For me, motorsports, I'm all about handlebars and throttle and brake. So border cross it's elbow to elbow, side by side start out of gates. The buzzer has its sequence, it drops. We all pull out of the gates at the same time, and we go down a course that's got rollers and jumps, gap jumps, tabletops, and these big sweeping berms. And the pros riding these courses, I mean, they are flying. They're, some of these jumps are 90 foot long. For us adaptive guys, they had different options, shorter options, like 50 foot.
A short one.
Yeah. And so it's really intense racing. And, we're side by side, we're clicking boards going down through these corners and stuff. And, when you get tangled up with somebody, it can hurt. I mean, when those edges on snowboards, for all you snowboarders out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You get a little off balance and your edge catches and it slams you to the ground so fast that you don't even know what happened. Try doing that, going down this motocross style course at X Games. It was pretty wild.
How good were you when you started?
Not good. No.
Not good.
I've been so used to being, at the top level, racing motocross at the expert level and then racing pro snowcross. Like, I'm accustomed to being one of the top guys. And snowboarding, no, man, I was starting rock bottom. These other guys that have been doing it for a while, they were looking at this freaking Midwestern guy coming in here in his motocross race gear with his full face helmet. And I'm like, what are you doing? But, I evolved. I learned pretty quick. And over the next couple of years, I started to fit in pretty good.
Were you dangerously bad to start off with? Were you worried about hurting yourself or hurting somebody else?
Well, me in my mind, I definitely thought about that. I wasn't that bad. I knew I didn't want to get tangled up with somebody else. So I kept extra space. In the start, I decided, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to hold for a split second before I pull out of the gate, because I didn't want to mess up these other guys' race by doing something stupid out of the gate. So, I held for a split second and then pulled out after everybody else, had a board length on me. So I was respectful. I didn't want to wreck these guys that have been, training for this for years. And here comes this guy, just part-timer from Midwest Minnesota, just throwing himself down the course. But
because you can get out first and then go crash on the first feature and take everybody out. And they're like, okay, thanks for the help.
I would not be, they would not be my fan after that.
How long did it take you to get good? Because you kind of, I mean, doing this, the snowmobiles, doing the motocross, you had a sense of what you were trying to do. It was just a different vehicle, I assume. So you knew what you were supposed to do. How long did it take you to get good?
Well, that's the one edge that I had as being a professional athlete for so many years up to this point. It's like, I knew how to train for things. Like I knew how to take a look at the big picture, understand what I needed to accomplish mentally, physically, equipment wise, and just piece it all together. So I was able to learn a lot quicker. So 2012, that was the big, opening to snowboard competition for me. But the next year it was just recreational. And after Sochi Paralympics in 2014, there was 2 athletes using our BioAdapt equipment, Michelle Salt from Canada, and then Brazilian Andre. He had a moto knee and a VersaFoot too. And at that point in 2014, that was their inaugural year for border cross being in the Paralympics. And so it was only one class, well, 2 classes, it was men's and women's. So there's no difference between above knee and below knee amputees. And obviously there's a very big difference in performance and ability. So up to that point, me as an athlete, I didn't have any interest in it because I knew that I would never be a medal contender against a below knee amputee. And after Sochi, the summer afterwards, they made the announcement that they were going to add more classes. And that's when the coach at the time, Maya Wheeler, he reached out to me that fall. So it would have been the fall of 2014. And he's like, hey, Mike, they just added some more classes. And, it separates the above knee and below knee amputees. And, we think that if you were interested and motivated, you could be a contender. And so, I'm talking with my wife, Sarah, about, I'm like, what do you think here? Because they invited me to go to the first World Cup of that season, which was in Netherlands. And I had like a 2.5 week notice. And so
it seems far for the course right now.
Yeah, it's just like, seize the opportunity, right? It was, I had to think about it because I'm not a snowboarder. I'm a motorsports guy. I was still prime time adaptive moto and snowcross for X Games. And, to veer off and become a snowboarder was a big, it was a big decision to make. But, I'm like, yeah, I got to try it. And so I ended up going to the first World Cup and ended up winning a medal and against Chris Voss nonetheless, which I'm still battling with every single year. And so we've, all paralleled since, that year. I mean, he competed at Sochi in 14. I think at that time he was like, what was he, 15 or 16 years old? And so he was, just getting into it and learning a lot. And then, I was just, coming in and learning a lot as well. And yeah, that was pretty crazy.
It was he was the guy to beat then? Chris Voss was the guy to beat in your class?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, he was the one to beat. And so there was a Europa Cup a couple days before the World Cup. And the Europa Cup, I ended up taking a silver. And then the World Cup, I ended up beating them and taking a gold, which I was like, I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And everybody else is like, who's this guy coming in? He's like, nobody's ever seen me before. And, here I am. I come in and just won a World Cup. So it was a pretty big moment.
Was that head-to-head that you won the World Cup, or was it timed? Or
that was just time trial. So it was just racing against the clock. And and at that time it was bank slalom. So it's racing against the clock down a course with a whole bunch of right and left hand turns, super tight. It's got these really nice berms that are lined up. So you're just like, it's a lot of fun.
Were you surprised Were you surprised
Absolutely.
when you were number one?
Yeah, I was like, serious? But yeah, it was, yeah, I was totally surprised to me. I didn't, you know, I actually rode pretty well. I rode a lot better than I thought I was going to. And yeah, it was, it was an eye opener. And then ended up, you know, over the course of that season, raced a couple more World Cups and ended up getting injured, unfortunately, in that following January or early February, end of January.
Are you getting more people onto your product as you're getting more successful? And how did that work? Was it your success that brought people to your product, or was it word of mouth, or how did it work?
It was a combination of all, but you know, at the beginning it was, so we just started getting into social media at that point. And then also the X Games were a big thing because there was some great coverage of my story and, you know, the equipment I was building. So the word was traveling just through media engagements and, you know, success as an athlete. And yeah, since then, snowboarding has been the top sport for our adaptive equipment.
Do you attribute some of your success to your success in building a better leg?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when I first started, there was only one other option available for a sport type knee system, you know, that was trying to achieve the same type of goal, you know, using a mountain bike style shock in it. And I came in and so, well, maybe there was two at that point, but they were very specific for their purpose. And so I wanted to create something that had, you know, versatility to it, and which opened it up for a lot of sports. And, you know, within that, the extra time spent with the versatility, you know, behind it, allowed for a lot better performance in different sports. And yeah, absolutely. It performs better than anything that I've seen or tried. And, you know, obviously that translates into quicker times down the course.
What did this look like? Did you have people knocking on your door all the time saying, I want your leg?
It definitely would see a spike after big competitions and social media posts and stuff. And so, yeah, the competition and the success or the exposure of our company and products, you know, work hand in hand. So the good thing about all that is that means I get to keep competing and, you know, doing all this fun recreational stuff and, you know, capture it on video and share it with everybody. And that definitely is our, you know, our marketing program.
How did that, were you conflicted at all? Because you're an athlete and you're a manufacturer, and which one is your priority?
Yeah, that's definitely been the battle since like 2012, 2013. You know, either one of them, being an athlete or being a company owner, manufacturer, they are both very much full-time positions in themselves. And so to try and juggle both of those, along with being, you know, a father of our daughter, she was born in 2013, right? I mean, 2013 was like the most incredibly difficult, challenging, complicated year ever, because we moved from our old home up in Brainerd. We moved into a new building. It was our busiest year with Biodapt, and we had Summer X Games, and Lauren was born in November 2013. So it was like so much stuff just like coming down at one time. And since then, it's, you know, been a constant battle of, you know, trying to make it all work in unison.
And I'd imagine, like, race day, there are people who have a problem with their leg and they're saying, hey, Mike, can you help me out? And meanwhile, you're trying to get your act together to focus on your sport. And it's like, yeah, I'll help you out. But has that happened? And what do you do when it happens?
Yeah, it is. It's happened a few times to my teammates, to my competitors. And for the most part, everybody's really respectful. You know, when it's game time, you know, they're very hesitant to, you know, being, hey, take time out. You know, can you help me for a minute? And my coaches and support staff have been very helpful with that too, to kind of put a barrier around me, if something happens to one of my teammates using my equipment. Because, you know, when we're not in competition phase or day, I'm very much hands-on with, you know, anybody who needs help that's using our equipment. And yeah, I mean, that means our, you know, my teammates with the US team, as well as the, you know, 15, 20 other athletes from other countries around the world that show up to these World Cups. And in itself is, I mean, it's such a rewarding thing to see, you know, 6 or 8 or 10 different BioAdapt products lining up on course at any given World Cup. And it's pretty rad. But yeah, there has been a few times where it pulls my focus as an athlete, but you know, I'm okay with it, you know, unless it's, you know, at the Paralympics or something. And because that, it works so hand in hand with me as an athlete and me as the prosthetic builder. You know, I'm wearing 2 hats. I'm the athlete, and I'm, you know, the manufacturer that's supporting and helping some of these other athletes. And, you know, sometimes I've got to, like, midday, I got to change hats. And, you know, when I'm on the start line and I'm looking over to Noah Elliott, my teammate, but he's also, you know, basically one of my biggest competitors, I'm like, oh yeah, I hope your leg falls off, but I really don't, because that would come back on my other hat, BioAdapt, like that would look bad. No, so I just got to beat him straight up as a better athlete.
You just have to be faster than he is. Your leg is on display when you compete. You have shorts on that side, on that leg. Is it one to show off the leg? Is there a bit of a Terminator kind of thing going on? Is it also, is it easier to work on your leg when you don't have to pull your pants up to make it work?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why I choose to do that. One is because I believe it's good for our sport. When there's an audience watching an adaptive race or a Paralympic race, and the person looks normal, then they're sitting there questioning, well, why is this person racing in the Paralympics? But when I can, you know, show them, so it's obvious, oh, that dude's missing his leg, he's got a robot leg, you know, that's going to engage him. And, you know, in my mind, that's good for our sport, because then they can process what's happening there. And on the other side, yeah, absolutely, I want to show off the hardware, you know, for my company. And you know, it's easier. Yeah, I guess it's easier to work on, but I mean, that's not a big part of it. But, you know, it started out like, it's kind of funny, because when it started out, when I started snowboarding, I'm flopping all over the place. I'm falling over in the lift line, and I'm just, you know, I'm looking like I'm tripping all over myself. And if I were to, like, have it all covered up, they'd be like, what the hell is this guy doing? What, he's like, is he drunk? You know, what's he doing? He's like falling over. Well, when the leg is visible, then they'll be like, oh yeah, he's missing a leg. That's awesome. So it totally, like, visually, it captures your eye, and you know, it can answer a lot of its own questions for itself.
Well, that's a part of it for you, because you have to build a functional leg. You want the best possible function, but you also have to be concerned about the aesthetics. This thing has to look cool. How much of your time do you spend going, okay, if we do this, this is going to work this way, but it's also going to look cool? How much of a consideration is that?
In the beginning, it was more just based on function and trying to keep it lightweight. But now, as we're evolving things, we're putting more time and effort into making it, you know, look cool, you know, sculpting it more into, you know, 3 dimensions. And we're really excited about this new stuff we're working on. Yeah, over the last 2 years, 3 years, our company has been able to expand and bring on a designer, a CAD designer, who's been really helpful to help bring my ideas into reality. We've been working with SolidWorks CAD programs and developing some really awesome stuff. And, you know, I'm over the shoulder of Mitch, he's my CAD guy. And so I get things, you know, 50% there with my hand drawings, and then, you know, hand it over to him, and he starts building it on, on a digital frame. And then, you know, I check back in him, you know, and he's got this component built, and, you know, we can just communicate back and forth, and it happens so much faster than it did with me and my pencil and paper. And I'm really excited about where things are going with our company. And, you know, we just got our new latest and greatest toy in the shop this week, which is a laser, so we can do our own engraving. And we can get some customization with names and that kind of thing on the equipment, as well as, it opens up some other capabilities in our shop, to bring in-house other than outsourcing it. What's not cool about a laser beam too?
It's super cool. I mean, but that's also on the Paralympic side. The equipment is one of the biggest entrees, right? It's not about what you're doing differently. It's like, hey man, that's really cool. And if it's cool, it's not like you're in the hospital. It's not like, it's something that is high tech. I mean, you've got some amazing shocks. I mean, you're looking at how you can do the absorption better and all this stuff. Like, people look at that and go, oh no, this is high performance. This isn't playing around. And but it brings people in because it's such an easy way to start a conversation about the equipment. On the competition side, getting back to the competition side. So you started recognizing, like, you won the overall globe in what was it, 17, 18, right? So you're going from being nervous getting out of the start with these guys to being one of, if not the top guy in a lot of the races as you were going into PeongChang. So PeongChang is 2018. What was your preparation like? What were your expectations, and who were you looking at as your biggest competitor?
As we were a year out from the games, so we ended the 2017 season at the test event in South Korea, and at that point, I was still on the fence if I was going to be able to continue towards this dream of going to the Paralympics, or if I needed to scale back and just focus on my business. But I realized it was something that I really, truly wanted to do, and I was going to have to make some sacrifices in order to be the best athlete I could be. But when my wife Sarah and I, when we made the decision that this was going to be my goal, I'm putting all my effort into this. Bioadapt is going to have to, take a bit of a hit with my time investment in it. But when I made that decision, my training program increased by probably about 40% from what it was. And that allowed me to just have that mindset to not question, the investment that I was putting into it as far as my effort and the time away from home. I mean, the year going into the games, I was on the road for 180 days. And I'm sure you can understand it just as good as I can, but, for everybody else that's listening here, it's like the year going into the games is not like the previous, 3 years. It's like, you've got to be on it. You've got to be training. You've got to be traveling to these World Cups everywhere. And it was fun because I made the decision that I'm not going to let everything else bother me because I'm on the road. I'm going to be the best athlete I can be. And that allowed me to perform so much better. And the biggest change that I felt going into that year was, like you said, I wasn't scared about pulling out of the start gate and wondering what my legs were going to do going over these next features. Like, I was able to pull out of the gate and charge and, be able to ride and perform. And yeah, I knew my biggest competitors were going to be my teammate Noah Elliott and Chris Voss, because, Chris Voss has been doing it a long time. He's very committed. And then Noah, he's just got this amazing raw talent from the skateboarding side of his life. And he just got this, he can flow so well. And so I'm like, man, I'm going to have to use all my assets that I've accrued over the years as a professional athlete and use those tools to help me perform the best. And, my goal was going into the games was to perform my best under the ultimate pressure of the world event like that. And I achieved it. And I was so incredibly pumped about it.
How did it happen at the games? How did things shake out? So there's the border cross and then there's the bank slalom. So two separate events. And what happened? Tell us
we started the program. Well, the first amazing experience was being the flag bearer, which was the ultimate honor. And then we went right into border cross, which is a cutthroat competition. It's bracket racing. So at that time, it's 2 at a time. And so we go through the brackets, and I got to race against all my teammates on the way to the gold medal. And so unfortunately, I had bumped out Mark Mann, my teammate, halfway through, and then found myself in racing against Noah, and I was able to pull a start and beat him out. So he went into the bronze medal round, and then me and Chris Voss ended up dueling in the gold medal round. And I tell you what, I was more excited when I won the semifinal, you know, which put me into the gold round, because I knew Noah was going to be like probably the toughest competition. And so I'm lined up with him, and I'm like, I got to win this one. And then I'm guaranteed a gold or a silver. And so when I won that against Noah, like that, all the weight just shed off my shoulders. I'm like, hell yeah, I'm guaranteed a gold or silver. I just got to make it down the course. And I mean, there's a lot of other drama there that day too, because our high-tech starting gate malfunctioned, which put things on pause for 2 hours. Oh, no. Meanwhile, I'm looking at, you know, I'm a mechanical guy. I'm looking at the guys running the start gates, messing around with them. I'm like, why the hell is this so high-tech? Like, it can be a mechanical system where, you know, the lever drops and the gates drop, and like they've got all these computerized, you know, electronic magnets that are, I'm like, why? And so anyways, we ended up going to an old school rubber band start. So there was a staff member standing between our gates with the rubber band, like old school motocross. Yeah, just a bungee cord. So they did their cadence, and he'd let go of the bungees. As soon as the bungees were gone, you know, we yanked out of the gate. And I had
the biggest event of your life. Yeah. You're going back old school. You're going to the most crude start you could imagine.
I know. I was all right with it. I mean, I grew up racing motocross with bungee cord starts. You know, back at the county fair races and stuff. Everybody else is like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do? It's not fair." This and that. I'm like, "You're not going to react quicker than a bungee cord, so it's going to be all good." So yeah, I was. You know, I didn't get in my head other than, you know, just waiting around for 2 hours while they, you know, mess around trying to figure out if they're going to cancel the event or not. I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah, let's figure this out. So we ended up racing. I got a great hole shot, and Chris Voss, he ended up hitting the feature funny towards the end of the front straight, and he skidded out. And so I was able to just, you know, not really charge, but, you know, make a good pace all the way down towards the bottom. I actually didn't realize he crashed until about 2/3 of the way down, when I looked over my right shoulder, and he was nowhere. I'm like, no, I'm going to win. And I'm like, no, focus on your run. And yeah, when I slid across the finish line, I was hit by the most incredible, overwhelming emotion of accomplishment, you know, that I've ever had as an athlete. And I've competed at some really big events over the years at X Games and stuff, but nothing compares to wearing the red, white, and blue in front of the world and winning gold. And later that evening at the medal ceremony, yeah, when the red, white, and blue raised up on the center pole and the national anthem played, it was that was a powerful moment. And yeah, it was incredible.
Now, Noah, you said, is on your leg. He's on a BioDAP leg. Is Chris Voss on a BioDAP leg as well?
So, yeah, that's a funny story. So Chris Voss, he still has both legs, but he's got some paralysis in it, basically he needs to wear an external brace on his, I believe it's his right leg. So he has limited control, so he needs an assistive brace system. And, you know, for the first few years competing against him, I'm looking at this brace system, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I could build something so much better than that. But why would I want to help him? You know, the problem solver engineer in me, you know, is looking at it like I could do something. But as long as he's my competitor, I'm not going to go out of my way to try and make him faster. So, you know, in 2019 at World Champs, I finally won a world championship. And I'm like, if I'm going to win, I'm going to retire, and that'll be the end of my snowboard career because I'm, no spring chicken anymore. And I'm like, it's good. I've checked all the boxes, and so I'm having a conversation with Chris and having a glass of wine up in Finland, and I'm like, yeah, this feels pretty good. You know what? We should have a conversation about your leg, and I think I could build you something. And so we continued conversation, and so the next summer or the next spring, I realized, well, you know what? I'm probably going to keep competing. Meanwhile, I get this phone call from Chris, and he's like, "Hey, Mike, when can I come out and get my leg built?" I'm like, "Oh, me, previous month before that, I was like decided I'm going to continue racing, but now I said I'm going to build him a better leg. So I'm kind of caught in a tough spot here, but I can't tell him no because my BioAdapt hat, it means a lot to be able to help people achieve their goals through my company. And, that's bigger than me being an athlete. And so I ended up building him a really, really trick custom leg that he's been using for the last, season and a half, last season, and going into this season, he's using a second generation version of it. And he's, it's impressive the additional range of motion that I was able to get with this system that I created for him. So I'm going to have to build myself a better leg going into this next year and a half so I can, raise my level a little bit.
And it is the next year and a half. You're going through Beijing 2022?
Yes, that's the plan as of now. I mean, there's obviously lots of questions around what's happening in the world right now, but we're running towards that goal. And I'm training my butt off here every week, and I enjoyed that experience so much, and I want to see if I can do it again.
What's the translation from what you're doing on the very top level to what the ordinary person might do with a prosthetic leg?
So like it's as far as the equipment we're using or the effort put into it?
No, I mean, in terms of how much better, I guess, does all of the effort that you put into a sports leg, the best testers in the world, right? I mean, you're sure after you've been using it that somebody's not going to go out and break it. But also the performance side of it, how much does all of your testing, all of your competing, how much does that performance help the average person?
It's 50%, 75% better than what you would typically get with everyday type devices. I mean, we're professional adaptive athletes, and, we require the best equipment. And when we're competing against people from around the world to try and be the best, it's like we're motivated to push the level of performance. And, that translates into our equipment and the way we train and prepare for it. And so, it's like that in all other sports too. Motorsports, the elite level racing, is what creates all of this really incredible equipment that, in the end trickles down into everyday use equipment. Our Paralympic snowboarding has been a huge piece of creating better prosthetic equipment, which eventually is going to help out a lot of other sports and activities at the recreational level. It's honestly, it's not that much different at this point, from what I'm competing on personally compared to what my customers have. I'm always just a little bit, I'm not sharing all my goodies, but it's usually like a year behind.
They can get it next year. They just have to come back and buy a new one. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool. Mike, thanks so much for helping us out. This is, you're doing such an amazing job, not only as an athlete, but in the community, as a representative of the community, as a representative of your country, helping out a variety of other athletes, even your biggest competitors, and continuing to grow the sport. It's been one of the things that I've loved about Paralympic athletes is that we're all responsible for continuing to push the sport forward. We feel a sense of ownership with the sport. It's not just you're going to come in, you're going to collect your medals, and you're going to get out. You have a sense of ownership, and you have truly owned that sport and owned what you're trying to do. So I really appreciate that. And there's a lot of support that comes from a lot of different places. We're actually partnering with Adaptive Spirit and with No Excuses. Adaptive Spirit's a big fundraising event for both the snowboard, the alpine, and the Nordic teams. And No Excuses is the arm that's helping athletes get some more equipment. I don't know if you've had any athletes who have bought any of your stuff through No Excuses yet, but if they haven't, they probably will at some point.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, over the last couple of years, that program has helped out, myself as well as all my teammates. A lot of it goes to our adaptive equipment. So yeah, it's as Paralympic athletes, we're every little bit helps because we're not like big time pro sports salaries by any means. We're we're working day jobs to try and continue to compete as world-class athletes. And so these programs like No Excuses and Adaptive Spirit are key things that help us keep going and be the best we can be.
So we'll be looking forward to you in Beijing 2022. How is it looking? What are your expectations? Do you have any expectations right now? Are you allowed to tell us? Is it a secret?
Well, gold for sure. No, I honestly, I will be happy on the podium, whatever position it is, but I'm always going to shoot for the gold. I love the challenge of preparation, and I love, lining up against my competitors and, ultimately hoping and trying to be the best.
Mike, thanks a ton. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for everything you do. Good luck, and we'll look forward to seeing you in person hopefully soon and seeing you on television in 2022.
All right. Thanks a lot, Chris. I appreciate being part of the show. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Take care.